Hey everyone, and welcome back to Elon Musk Land. For the past few years, we all know that Elon Musk and SpaceX have been working on developing the Starship. His main goal is to make a fully reusable rocket, which will be mainly used for interplanetary transportation of people and cargo. All of SpaceX's energy is focused on this development, and now there is a new development too. SpaceX has just come up with a way to land this big boy. They're going to be using a neat trick to catch it mid-air. But how's it gonna work? Stay tuned to find out. Well, Elon Musk is a man who is full of surprises, and he always introduces some astonishing technological advancements day by day. And this time, he's introduced some new technology to SpaceX. This time, it's the technology that's gonna be used to land the rocket by catching it mid-air. Yeah, you heard that right, mid-air. SpaceX has come up with a new Super Starship, along with its super heavy landing trick. This is going to change the whole industry, saving SpaceX millions of dollars by saving crafts. He's also released detailed information about the final landing burn, and not only about the movement from directly above the Mechazilla. This is the first SpaceX tower that's going to be used mostly to launch and catch the Starship vehicles, along with the Super Heavy. The most exciting aspect of this is that it's located approximately 1,800 meters above the Mechazilla. Recently, a comparison was made between the Super Heavy and the Falcon 9 booster. It shows that the Falcon 9 booster starts the re-entry burn at about 1,800 meters, which is the same as the Super Heavy. Some people have even claimed that the Super Heavy is just another version of the Falcon 9 booster, just that the booster comes in at an angle. The angle's utility would come in handy when SpaceX has to perform a dogleg maneuver to protect the orbital launch mount and Mechazilla, if something were to go wrong during the early stages of the launch. In addition to this, the angle would also provide the required lift from the booster's body. This gives us a lot of information on what SpaceX wants to do with the Super Heavy. And by the looks of things, they will also do with the Super Heavy what they did with their Falcon 9 boosters. After this booster reaches a height of about 800 to 700 meters above the pad, it will switch off all of the other engines and then use the 3 center engines only. This is brought down from a total of 13 engines. This move causes a slight bump in the body acceleration graph. This, in turn, brings up a small challenge to the entire system. In case you didn't notice, the shutdown of certain engines means that the thrust vector control of the remaining 3 engines has to try and maintain the booster on its track. Whenever a rocket experiences a loss of engines, either by some engines shutting down, the remaining engines have to compensate for this sudden change in thrust vector control, also known as the engine gimbal. This is regardless of whether the rocket was going up or down, and this method is used for all the high-altitude Starship flight tests to date. Starships are the most advanced rockets to ever exist, and together with their Raptor engines, they're fitted with avionics and TVC hydraulic mechanisms, making it possible for Starships to perform this in flight with so much ease. When it gets to this point, the boosters become so slow that it's difficult to produce enough force to make it go up. During this period, it undergoes the necessary changes, and in simple terms, the booster is set up to change its engine sections straight down as it stands above the Mechazilla. In addition to this, the loss of all these engines means that the velocity will drop too. This is until the booster makes its final move to position itself at the center of the Mechazilla chopsticks, with the grid fins pointing left and right. Ryan Hansen Space released a clear and detailed animated video recently showing this mechanism properly. He also worked closely with a SpaceX 3D Creation eccentric member. This video shows how SpaceX will lift Booster 4 onto the orbital launch mount. It also highlighted the importance of the Mechazilla chopsticks in this process. This animation goes a long way towards giving a proper demonstration of the chopstick mechanism, as it demonstrates how the chopsticks will work in the same way during both lifting and catching of the booster. The boosters themselves will have a little kind of arm or anchor-like projection, which will then be used to hold onto the chopsticks as they are lifted or as they land. These anchors will be positioned in the middle of and directly under the grid fins, which are present on either side of the booster's hull. This shows the importance of the grid fins being orientated towards the chopsticks as the booster is coming down. However, the experts have started raising up some questions, but there's one important thing. Can SpaceX manage to bring about a rotational movement of their boosters as they descend? There was uninterrupted footage that showed the Falcon 9 making a descent from space to the LZ-1 at Kennedy Space Center, When you look at that footage, you can see that the entire process of the rotational movement was happening just a few meters above the pad, and it was very much under control. The boosters seemed to rotate back and forth as it descended, and just a few meters before getting to the pad, it stopped altogether. This was all thanks to the grid fins, which make it easier to control the rotational movement than when they were not there. So in theory, the Super Heavy is said to have the same mechanics. That means that we can expect it to do the same thing, but for safety purposes, and to keep everyone safe, the Mechazilla has some preventative measures if the booster is not positioned perfectly. One of them is that it can accommodate a few degrees of deviation from the rotational axes. From SpaceX 3D Creation Eccentric released another animated video that demonstrated the work of this safety measure. According to the video, there are certain pushers that close in on the boosters after they catch. Then they can go ahead and guide it to the correct position, which is at the center position of the chopsticks. In the end, the booster will be positioned on the orbital mount launch correctly. For years now, there's been the philosophy that experience makes you wiser, and it is true. This is what puts SpaceX in a position to achieve this. It also gives them the greatest advantage over any other space company. After all, they're the #1 private space company in the world right now. SpaceX has a total of about 101 landings of its orbital class rocket booster, giving them all the experience that they require to make this happen. Something else that's interesting about the lifting and launching is that the Mechazilla does not really have to move up and down as it catches the booster. The massive size of the Mechazilla is one of the causes of this phenomenon. It is estimated that the weight of each chopstick is about 100 tons. Another reason behind this is that the Falcon 9 does not need the drone ship to have any sort of dampening. All it requires is there to be an already present honeycomb crush blocks, which are present and inside the rocket's legs. However, the Super Heavy does not have any legs, so the question of having the honeycomb crush blocks to dampen the vertical descent is eliminated just like that. Instead of this, the Super Heavy has movable bars that mainly act as landing surfaces for the booster. Just like the Falcon 9 does with the help of its crushed legs, these bars can help achieve the distance to dampen the descent by moving up and down. Even though the distance is only a few centimeters, in theory it still plays a crucial part in achieving a smooth and soft landing. But as we know, the success of the Starship is determined by the softness of this landing. Lastly, there's also something to look at called the 5-second air hovering, which is what the Super Heavy does before it finally makes a landing. This is totally different from the suicide burn that people are used to seeing with the Falcon 9. For the suicide burn, it is a technique that is used to achieve zero velocity on each Falcon 9 rocket. When it comes to the Falcon 9 series, there are two reasons why SpaceX chose to stick to this technique of landing. The first is consuming a minimum amount of fuel in a suicide burn landing, and the second one is that the Falcon 9 engine is a Merlin 1D, which happens to have too much thrust and cannot be throttled down enough. Before the booster lands, it is lighter due to the almost empty tanks. This makes it impossible to hover, and if it manages to do this, it would only lose fuel. Because of this, the spaceship would only come to a standstill and then start ascending again. However, for the Super Heavy, the minimum throttle range of the Raptor engine is 10% of the total thrust developed by it. Elon Musk has confirmed that the value of this thrust is about 220 tons with a chamber pressure of 300 bar. This allows the hovering of the Super Heavy, and SpaceX wants to take full advantage of this to give the spaceship a proper landing. From this, we can see the determination of SpaceX to make this happen, and to make the Starship the most advanced created rocket in the world. They're doing everything possible to make the lifting and landing of the spaceship as smooth as possible, but do you think that it will work? Do you think that they're gonna do it? That's it for today's video. Go ahead and click on one of these two videos on your screen. See you there.